A criminal tattoo is one that gives you a certain status. It may be a beautiful picture to you, but to a crowd of prisoners, you must explain what that beautiful picture means. In prison, you can't refuse a person. Epaulettes, stars on the shoulders, stars on the knees, icons, churches, domes. 1 year, 1 dome, 1 cross, 1 prison sentence. A prison tattoo is a second passport. Car thief, burglar, safecracker, and so on. All of this is literally written on the person. Bad tattoos are things like images of genitals and similar symbols. If you get those, you end up on the far bunk, at the far table, basically surrounded by people considered to have a non-traditional sexual orientation. I tattooed 3 people a week every other day, and it was exhausting. I'd say that before that I hadn't slept all night making tattoos. And that machine, it was basically a breeding ground for hepatitis, HIV, and so on. All that prison romance, I don't need it. I want a knight holding a sword. Prison didn't just educate me, it raised me. My name is Sergei Chernuka. I'm a tattoo artist. I've been doing tattoos for 12 years. 5 of those years I spent in prison. Tattooing came into my life, you could say, from prison. I had a childhood friend who got locked up at 14 in a juvenile facility. When he got out, he knew that I had always drawn well since childhood. He started encouraging me. Let's make a tattoo machine. I'll assemble one for you, show you how it's done, and you'll tattoo something for me. That's basically how it all started when I was about 14 or 15. After that, everything just took off. The first time I went to a professional tattoo artist for a session, I watched how it was done with proper equipment. I saw it and realized that I wanted to connect my life with this. At that time, I was studying in my first year at a technical college. I realized that the profession I was studying for didn't interest me and I would never work in it. So I chose tattooing instead. During the first year, I made so many bad tattoos that I'm still ashamed of them. Because I was in a kind of subcultural crowd where people said, "Oh, you started tattooing? Cool, I want one too. Come on, come on." Even now, after 12 years, old acquaintances still come to me and say, "Sergei, remember, we need to redo this tattoo." They say they've been walking around with it for years and it doesn't look good anymore. I ended up in prison in quite a ridiculous way. My friend Nikita came to me for a tattoo session. After the session, we went to a bar to drink some beer and met some of his friends. Those friends had a conflict with a young man who owed them money. During the actual conflict, I wasn't there. I arrived when everything had already ended. So technically, there was no crime committed by me, but I was charged as an accomplice. When I was detained, they told me there was a victim. If you want to avoid criminal liability, you need to become a witness for the prosecution. At that moment, I thought the situation was trivial. But I grew up in a neighborhood where I knew what it means to be a prosecution witness and what it means to be a victim. Even if I didn't know those guys, I still wouldn't testify against them. Not because of criminal rules or anything, but because of my personal human principles. So I refused to testify. They never found the other guys, and they added me to the case as an accomplice. Basically, I ended up charged with robbery and extortion. Article 162, Part 2, Article 163, Part 2, 5.5 years in a general regime prison. The judge originally asked for 13 years. For me, it was a huge shock. We drank some beer with the guys. When I first arrived at the prison camp, the town was small and everyone knew each other. I already had acquaintances there who knew that I had been sent to prison and that a tattoo artist was coming. A professional tattoo artist who could tattoo anything anyone wanted. In the camp there was everything: phones, alcohol, even prohibited substances, though of course in limited supply. So I immediately understood that bringing in professional equipment wouldn't be a problem. During the first month, I made tattoos with a homemade machine. A man who was basically the one in charge of the barrack came up to me and said, "I want stars tattooed." I said, "Well, I need a guitar string, a motor, electrical tape, a power supply, and ink." 20 minutes after I gave him the list, I already had everything. I tattooed the stars for him, and that was it. The next day, there was already a line. You can't refuse a person in prison. If a decent guy asks you for something, if he says, "Sergei, I want a tattoo. You don't have the right to refuse. It got to the point where in 2015, a man came to me and said he wanted a tattoo, and I scheduled him a year and a half ahead. I actually wanted it to be like that, because back in 2013, when I moved to Moscow and started working in a studio, there were tattoo artists there who really had waiting lists a year and a half long. At that time, I thought, wow, that's so cool. The person must be at such a high level if people have to wait a year and a half to get a tattoo from him. And people really waited a year or even a year and a half until their turn came. I thought, I want that too. And it happened, but only in prison. I didn't receive any money for it. Tattooing for money in prison was considered wrong because you're in trouble. The other person is also in trouble. Everyone is in prison, and people don't have their own money, only what their relatives send them. Why would you take money from someone's family for your own benefit? A person could thank you with tea, candy, cigarettes. But if you took money and someone found out about it, you could even be punished for that. A criminal tattoo is one that gives you a certain status. More precisely, you already have a status and you want to show it. So you tattoo a symbol representing it. Stars on the knees mean refusal to obey the prison regime. It means I will never kneel before the system. If a person matches that status, or sometimes even if he doesn't but wants to, he tattoos stars on his knees. But in prison, no one will simply allow you to make a criminal status tattoo. If you really live by the prison code, if you're considered a tough guy, always in solitary confinement, then maybe. But if you're just an ordinary prisoner working in the prison, workshop or in the kitchen, you won't tattoo criminal symbols on yourself. You can tattoo something neutral. There's something unrelated to prison culture, and nobody will question you about it. But if a person follows the prison code and has a certain status, he tattoos symbols of that status, epaulets, stars on the shoulders, stars on the knees, icons, churches, domes. I tattooed things like that too. If a respected criminal figure came to you, it didn't matter if your waiting list was a year long, you had to find time for him. You would move everyone else aside and tattoo him first. There was a case when a kitchen worker tattooed stars on himself 3 days before his release. During his whole sentence, he carried soup, washed dishes, and worked in the kitchen. But secretly, he decided to tattoo stars, and some friend tattooed them for him. Someone from his co-workers in the kitchen told the criminal authorities about it. The criminals caused a commotion. They were like, how is that even possible? Who tattooed criminal stars on a kitchen worker? That's completely wrong. It's against the rules. Then they brought the guy to me and said, Sergey, redo it right now. Take the machine and cover it up. Cross it out with crosses or something. Do whatever you want, just redo it. Because those tattoos don't match his status. They actually felt sorry for him because he was a young guy. They didn't force him to erase the tattoo himself with a brick or sandpaper. They brought him to me and said, just cover it. So I covered the stars with 2 black clouds. He's probably still walking around sad to this day, grey like a cloud. Domes are not very popular now. They were more common in the late 1990s and early 2000s. 1 year in prison meant 1 dome, and 1 cross meant 1 prison sentence. Snarling tattoos. Any aggressive animal's snarl also carries meaning if you get it in prison. A snarl represents hostility toward authority, the police, the system, and so on. So it's also quite a serious tattoo. For tattoos made outside prison, no one really questions you. You arrive and they say, oh, you're covered in tattoos. What do they mean? You say, well, a spider web, this one, that one. And what does it mean? Nothing, just artistic. Then they say, all right. But if you arrive covered with Russian criminal-style tattoos, and you didn't get them because you were part of that criminal status, but simply because you like the aesthetic, for example, you like church domes and think they look beautiful, then you must be able to explain that. If you cannot explain it, people will likely treat you as if something is wrong with you. Because for prisoners, almost every tattoo has a meaning. For them, every tattoo says something, like, this means I love my mother. This means I love jam. This means I love cookies. Bad tattoos are things like images of genitals and similar symbols. If you have those, you're immediately put on a blacklist. You end up on the far bunk and the far table, sitting with prisoners considered part of the lowest social group, people labeled with non-traditional sexual orientation, or those who have been disgraced in prison hierarchy. They can be called by many different names. In a prison colony, there are several main categories of people. Muziki, ordinary prisoners. Blatni, criminal authorities. Krasny, those cooperating with administration. Obizheni, the lowest outcast group. The Obizheni are a completely separate group, though you don't interact with them at all. As for the Krasny, I wouldn't say they are all informants. Among the activists, there were actually many decent guys whom I talked to during my entire sentence. Some even helped me with different things. But there were also people who would come and say, "Can you tattoo me?" I knew that the person was an activist. I knew that besides working for the prison administration, he also informed on prisoners. And I knew that if I made a tattoo for him, he would immediately report me to the prison officers. Then they would come to search my cell, and I would only make things worse for myself. So I told such people, No, you must be mistaken. I don't do tattoos anymore. I'm preparing to leave early. Tattooing in prison is prohibited. It is considered self-harm, intentionally injuring your body. If they catch you with a new tattoo, for example in the bathhouse, when an officer sees a fresh tattoo, they will file a disciplinary report and send you to a commission. At that commission, they can assign you a white tag. A white tag means you are placed on a special supervision register. You have to go to the duty office every 3 hours to check in, to confirm that you're alive, that everything is fine with you, and that you haven't harmed yourself. If they catch you tattooing someone, that's also a report, a disciplinary commission, 15 days in solitary confinement, and you'll be placed on the supervision register. The supervision register means you are considered prone to producing prohibited items, substances or devices. From the administration's point of view, this is punished very strictly. In our unit, the officer in charge actually wanted a tattoo, but even if I had wanted to do it, I couldn't. First of all, he was a police officer, a member of the prison service, and I think among the prisoners that would have caused a lot of condemnation. So yes, there was a moment when the officer approached me and said he wanted a tattoo. I told him, "No offense, but you're an officer and I'm a prisoner. I'll be released in about a year, and I'll be working in a tattoo studio. Come there, and I'll tattoo you then." These boundaries simply didn't allow me to tattoo him there. In the end, after I refused, he went to another tattoo artist among the prisoners. While that tattoo was being done, the operational officers suddenly arrived. Someone had reported that an officer was getting a tattoo from a prisoner. The officer almost had a criminal case opened against him and was fired with a scandal. That's why I never took such risks. For me, prison was a huge motivation, because it gave me enormous experience in tattooing. Before prison, I worked in a certain style, old-school, traditional tattoos. I wanted to try realism and grow professionally, but I understood that outside prison it would be quite difficult. You need to find models and tell them, "Sorry, maybe it won't work. Maybe I'll give you a bad tattoo." But in prison, every second person is basically a free canvas where you can practice and learn. Someone comes and says, "Sergey, I want a tattoo." I ask, "What kind?" They say, "Something beautiful." I show them different designs and say, "I'd like to try making this one." They say, "Wow, cool, I like it." So I try it on one person. It doesn't turn out well. They try on the second, still not good. They are satisfied with the result, but I'm not. After 5 or 6 people, I realize, wow, I've learned it. Now I can tattoo things that I couldn't do before. Often someone would come to me and say, "Sergey, can you give me a tattoo?" And I'd say, "Listen, I don't have needles or ink." Then he'd say, "No problem, we have a machine in our barrack." But that machine was basically a breeding ground for hepatitis, HIV, and other diseases. That machine had already been used on 10 people, and they would come to me and say, "Here's the machine, use it to tattoo me." But I wouldn't even touch it, because I understood the risks. For the first 3 months, I used only the same motor in my homemade machine. Some people know they have diseases, but many don't. And I didn't want to take responsibility for using the same machine on many people. About 3 months after I had been tattooing with that homemade device, one respected prisoner came to me and said, "Sergey, I want a tattoo, but I don't need all this prison romance. I want a knight holding a sword, in realism." He asked, "What do you need?" I said, "First of all, a proper machine, needles, inks, all of that." He asked, "Do you have that equipment outside?" I said, "Yes." He wrote a phone number on a piece of paper and said, "Give this to one of your friends or your parents. Let them bring your equipment to this person, and everything will be arranged." I thought, all right. So I asked my sister's husband to gather all my tattoo equipment. About 2 or 3 days after he passed the message along, that person came to me and handed me the box in exactly the same condition as Artem had given it on the outside. No one had even opened it. Nobody inspected it. They had even slipped 2 phones inside. I said, "Sasha, there wasn't only a tattoo machine in there, there were also 2 phones. He replied, "Well, I'll take one for the common use, and you keep the other one." So that's how I ended up with a proper tattoo machine. For me, it was a real shock. I thought, wow, this is exactly the same equipment I used in the studio. There were 4 packs of needles, and even colored ink had made it inside. I thought, all right, now I can finally do proper tattoos. I tattooed about 3 people a week every other day, and it was exhausting. First of all, because everything had to be done at night, since during the day, the guards were constantly walking around. From 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. there was free time when it was rare for an officer to come into the barracks. That was the time when tattoos could be done. The demand was high. You couldn't refuse people. And everything I could gain from tattooing in prison in terms of skill, I gained within the first 2 years. After that, it started to feel like a burden. Sometimes I'd be asleep and someone would wake me up in the middle of the night saying, "Sergey, I have a tattoo that needs to be covered up." And I'd say, "Are you crazy? It's 2 in the morning. I'm sleeping. I didn't sleep last night because I was tattooing. And you actually had the nerve to wake me up and disturb your cellmate's sleep. That's sacred. Get out of here." For me, Russian traditional tattooing is prison tattooing. In terms of meaning and symbolism, it carries a lot of weight. And visually, in my opinion, it looks very stylish. There was a peak of popularity of Russian prison tattoos on the outside around 2015-2017. For about 2 years, it stayed at the top among ordinary people, not prisoners. Because someone would get a prison-style tattoo, and others would say, "Wow, that's cool, I want one too." Great meaning, great design. If we talk about Europe, it was taken to an even higher level there. You could easily see tattoo models, completely covered in prison-style tattoos from head to toe, but not done with blue ink like in prison, done with proper inks and professional equipment. They would have epaulets, stars, domes covering the whole back and so on. Because, in my opinion, it's a style. I even got tattoos myself with this kind of Russian prison tattoo influence. I didn't do it because of prison meaning. I did it because it looks cool. The church domes I had done even before prison. In prison, I tattooed an abbreviation on my wrist. It comes from Soviet-style tattoos. I saw it somewhere, liked it a lot. Those abbreviations and coded meanings. So I tattooed an abbreviation and also a Viking. A Viking in prison symbolism represents robbery according to the criminal code. Russian prison tattoos are mainly about meaning. The execution itself is usually very simple, basically blue, rough tattoos. There isn't much artistic work in them. For example, someone draws a portrait of his girlfriend by hand, tattoos it, writes Valya, Sveta, or Dasha, and that's it. That already counts as a Russian criminal tattoo. I think what attracts people most is the image itself, because it's very unique. I think it's this individuality that makes people want these tattoos. And of course, the meaning behind them. As for chasing thrills, I think anyone who gets a prison-style tattoo understands that there's a saying, never promise yourself that you'll avoid poverty or prison. You could end up there at any moment. Maybe you didn't break in time, maybe something else happened. No one is completely safe from that, and then things can already become difficult. But again, I'll say that prison has changed a lot nowadays. Before, when someone went to prison in the 1990s, according to older guys who told these stories, when you arrived, you would take off your clothes. For example, in the bathhouse or in the barracks, and everyone could see everything about you. Your tattoos revealed everything. A prison tattoo was like a second passport. For example, finger ring tattoos usually showed your criminal article, your lifestyle, or the type of crime you were involved in. Car thief, burglar, safecracker, and so on. All of that was literally written on a person's body. Now it seems to me that it's more like a tribute to tradition. Like someone saying, I served time, and I want to show off a bit in front of my friends. So they tattoo stars or epaulets on themselves. I was even released on parole. Out of 5.5 years, I served 5 years and 3 months. When I got out, I was in shock, because not only had I changed, life around me had changed too. From 2013 to 2018, 5 years is actually a huge leap in time. It was an explosion of emotions. I remember a friend telling me that a man in his life can experience such emotions only twice, when he leaves prison for the first time, and when his son is born, meaning the continuation of his family line. But I was really shocked. When I came out, I didn't understand what was happening to me. It felt like I was dreaming. I kept wanting to pinch myself, because the moment of freedom had appeared in my dreams, almost every day during those 5 years. All that time, more than 5 years, you wait for only one thing, for it all to finally end. I wouldn't say prison educated me. It raised me. In those conditions, I shaped myself in such a way that now I always think 5 steps ahead. Whatever I do, I think about what will happen after it. For example, I never get into fights. Someone might say to me, "You're a bad person," and I might answer, "No, you're the bad one." Yes, that may hurt my pride, but if I reacted to that provocation and hit the person, what if he fell, hit his head, died, and then I'd have to sit in prison for another 10 years because of it? And I already know what prison is like. It's not sweet at all. There's nothing good there, and there never will be. You start to appreciate every little thing, literally everything. For example, you don't have to wake up in the morning for inspection. In prison, it's 6 a.m. wake up, 6 a.m. exercise. But now you can sleep until 9, or even 11 if you want. You don't have to report anywhere. Nobody pressures you. You don't have to tattoo people for tea or cigarettes anymore. Now you can simply charge the price you want. Yes, I returned to my professional work. When I got out, I thought that tattooing was over for me, because it's a very competitive field. Building a client base can take years. In October 2018, I came to Moscow and wanted to work at the same studio where I had worked before prison, but it had closed. Some friends invited me to work at their studio. I worked there for about a month and quickly built up a client base. Then I decided to stay in Moscow, and about 3 years later, I opened my own tattoo studio.